it is. That's what it's supposed to be. I'm just saying.
No, not that way. That way.
Right, left, you know.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the May meeting of the Radnor Parks and Recreation Board. If we can start by saying pledge allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I want to start this evening, before we get into anything else, with a couple comments about former Parks and Rec Board member Susan Michelson, who unfortunately passed away about a month ago, very sadly. I think she got ill, and it was a fairly rapid situation. And Susan, as we all know, was part of this board for a number of years. She was on the school board for about 8 years, including leading that school board. Was born in Scotland, which I didn't know until I read so as a Campbell, that meant a lot to me. She was born in Scotland from, I think, an Air Force parent who was over there. And so I just wanted to recognize the contributions that Susan made to this board, to our community. She was an adjunct professor over at Villanova, I think was her last position. And if we could just take a quick moment of silence to reflect on Susan. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I think you have in your package a copy of the minutes from our April meeting. Does anybody like to make a motion to approve those?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. Amy, before we jump into your reports, I think we'd like to let Jen have a couple minutes and tell us about Radnor walks, Radnor steps.
Yeah.
Radnor steps.
What's the?
If you could.
Come up to the you could come up to the podium.
Oh yeah, we want you to the podium.
We're official now.
Yeah.
Wow. This will be the simplest presentation ever. Thank you guys for letting me come speak for a minute. Tammy and I have known each other for a while. I'm a little taken aback. I didn't know about Susan, and she was always on the Radnor Trail on Friday mornings.
She was in the program.
She was, yeah, she was a big supporter.
She participated in.
She did. Anyway, Radnor Steps is, quite simply, it is a weekly walking program. So that's why this is going to be real quick. We meet every Friday on the Radnor Trail at the West Wayne entrance. And it's open to everybody, any fitness level, any age, any person who wants to have physical contact with a group in an active setting, they're welcome. So we started it with the idea that it would be a fitness option. And what I quickly realized is it is a fitness option. So if any physicians or any health groups that you know, if you know any physicians personally that work locally, I always thought that it would be a great referral source. So they could say, we want you to move more, and by the way, this happens every Friday. I try to make it very consistent so that it could actually, be used by people to refer patients. But more importantly, it's a community connector. So what we found is a lot of people that come regularly, they just really enjoy being with people. We walk for about an hour. We walk from the West Wayne entrance to the Radnor-Chester Road and back. If people have a time constraint, they turn around. If people are feeling slow or coming back from surgery, there's usually someone in the group that will walk their pace, and if not, I do. So it's really meant to be incredibly inclusive and so simple. So there's no registration, there's no, the cost of the program is me printing off some flyers, like when I run out, I keep them in my car and I greet businesses, that's it. So it's just, the reason why I'm here is solely for you guys to know that it happens and to maybe just promote it in unique ways. Like I always feel like if there's new people who have moved into the township, it's a great way to meet people. And again, all ages, older people. We have a lot of retired people, and I've learned a lot from people like that. It's like different than talking to everyone who's always talking about how busy they are with their kids, right? So, you know, I don't know if there's a committee that welcomes new people into Radnor, but if you want to include that, you know, give my cell phone number and we're there. The other thing that we do, just last thing I want to mention, is I connect with like Mainline Health, and it's kind of modeled after Walk with a Doc. So every once in a while we have chiropractors, we have physical therapists, we have physicians, we have mental health specialists, and if they come to, I didn't want to commit to finding someone each week, but it's been around long enough now where people will kind of come to me and say, I'd like to, you know, connect with the community, and then they give like a 10-minute talk before the walk, and then they walk with us so people could ask questions in an informal setting. So that's modeled after Walk with a Doc, and we actually have someone, if the weather holds up, tomorrow, just talking about balancing stress. So that's all. Thank
What
you so
time do
much.
you need? What time does this?
9 in the morning.
9 o'clock? Okay.
And I have an email distribution list. I'm sorry, I have an email distribution that I only use to communicate with people saying it's happening, you know, or it's not because of the weather, but most of the time I show up. Usually it's fine.
Now, did you say where it started?
Yeah, it starts, it's the West Wayne Avenue entrance to the trail. So technically it's called Friends of Radnor. I'm sure you guys are aware there's a GPS problem with that. If you put that into GPS, Friends of Radnor Trail, you end up on the other side of Liberty Place. You don't end up at the parking lot.
Gotcha.
So what I always say, I don't know if this is, you know, that's what I say, and it's a private business, so Mainland Health they have a problem putting that on their flyer. But then I just give my cell phone number, and if anyone gets lost, they usually find it in time. So.
Your house is right there too.
Behind, right.
What's the average amount of people who show up weekly?
You know, when we first started it, we thought that it would, you know, not go through the winter. I've got now like some bad weather athletes,
Yeah.
so I would say 8 people show up very regularly. There's probably like another 10, 12 that kind of come whenever it works into their schedule, and that's the whole point. No one should have to commit to it, but it's there if people want it.
Great.
I know Susan was a trooper. Susan would be up there walking in the snow.
Yes,
In
yes.
the snow.
She was
Yeah,
there
she really
almost
was.
every week. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Sarah Armstrong. They would be,
Yeah.
I'm sure, making the world a better place through those talks.
Yes.
So thank you guys so much. Give me some minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out, Jen. All right, great. Tammy, would you like to give your report?
Sure. So recreation report for April. I know we talked last meeting about spring extravaganza. We saw a video and saw how successful that was. I won't go into any details about it this month, but we did have the trout derby that was scheduled for April as well. It was rescheduled because of weather. We actually ended up having it the first weekend in May, which was another rainy weekend, but they did get most of it in. Is an event that had been going on for 22 years. It's led by the Chester Valley Sportsman's Group at Sawmill Park, and it was sold out once again, so we did take a formal registration for it. Very popular event. Unfortunately affected by weather, but the spring extravaganza wasn't, which was great, which is a new trend for us. We also had Arbor Day in late April, another event we had to reschedule because we had a bad rain the day it was scheduled on the 26th of April. 27 years we were recognized for being a Tree City USA, real exciting. 12 trees that were planted at Hartford Park, which was a new location for us, thanks to the Radnor Conservancy. And then Wheels of Wayne, lots of planning for Wheels of Wayne, of course, throughout the month of April, and was scheduled for the first weekend of May, ended up getting rescheduled for May 19th, just in lieu of Mother's Day this upcoming Sunday, so we're looking forward to good weather next Sunday for Wheels of Wayne. Right now, the department's knee-deep in programming, not only the spring programs that are up and running, but also getting ready for summer. We've got a lot of really great things going on this spring, preschool t-ball, preschool soccer. We have an outdoor nature program that's going on at the Willows, and then we have a new skateboarding clinic that's happening successfully as well. So there's some programs we've done in the past there that are now sort of having a little bit of new life being breathed into them this spring, so we're excited about that. And then gearing up for summer camp. Heather and our staff are in the process of hiring and coordinating all the pieces, the schedule, meeting and coordinating with a lot of our returning staff, which the good news is a lot of folks are coming back this year. So once again, we have amazing tenure that just continues to grow with that program. We can talk more about that, of course, in some of the details and the facts and figures next month. Registration's still underway. It's doing very well. And then we have obviously a plethora of other activities that'll be going on throughout the summer. Everything ranging from chess to theater to Harry Potter, all kinds of fun camps that'll be happening, and working with, of course, the Radnor Activity Center remaining closed and trying to navigate that piece and relocation of activities and events throughout that. So.
And Tammy, how's the relocation work going with your group? I know you've got to reach out. You're reaching out to various schools, et cetera, to try and help overcome the fact that we're not going to have that facility for use. How are you making it happen from that standpoint?
Well, I guess there's probably a small chance we maybe do get it back. I don't know that for sure. I know Radnor Activity Center is on our agenda for later tonight, so we can talk a little bit about what's going on with the facility. But in the event that we don't get it back in time for summer camps that begin at the end of June, what we're trying to do is relocate to Radnor Middle School or school district schools. Obviously, those are our first choice because they make the most amount of sense. And then we've also been looking at different places like Archbishop Carroll, I know, is one that we've reached out to, St. Catherine's and some of the other private schools. As some of our other one-week camps already do take place at private schools like
Right.
Hilltop, and we've used Sacred Heart in the past and a couple of the churches as well. So we're just trying to navigate that process because right now registration is open for all of our summer programming, so things are underway, things are filling. I'm sure there's some that
Right.
are doing better than others, so we're trying to make sure we have secure backups through that process.
Okay, great. Chuck and Andrew, maybe Tammy needs any help with the school district with regard to needing facilities, depending on what happens to
Okay,
RAC, and
yeah.
she reach out to you guys if she
Sure.
needs some help there. Great.
Anything you need is fine.
Yeah, we just talked today about.
Oh, great. Okay. Thanks.
Good, thank you. Other than that, the only other really big project we're working on, other than park-related projects and facilities-related projects, are we had launched a new online recreation system last year. Unfortunately, the platform really isn't working that well for us. We've had some issues with it, with folks not being able to set up accounts, be able to navigate it efficiently. So we are doing feasibility right now on a new company, and we've had some meetings with finance on their pieces and modules in terms of how they connect, and we hope that we'll be going through a new launch on a new system here soon too. So that's been another big project for us.
Is that a sunk cost on that old software?
Well, it served its purpose for the time in which we've been using it. The good news is that it was already part of a financial software system that finance was endeavoring and are using. It was a big investment by the township in terms of how it facilitates all the departments and ties together their financing. So those are all costs that are well invested because the main system works really well. It's just the online system they have is sort of like an extra module. It just doesn't fit our needs.
Right.
Like programs like Radnor Day Camp and some of the programs that are like events that we register, like Daddy Daughter, where you can have multiple people in one family. Unfortunately, it just doesn't accommodate it the right way. We had every expectation it was going to work well for us. It just didn't. So I don't expect that we'll lose too much on it.
Okay, great.
The only other thing I had was Parks did give me a report just on some of the activity that they had been doing and working with Steve McNillis and his guys. I know they helped out tremendously at the Arbor Day celebration that we had, even though it was a small group because it was during the day. They were there. They planted the trees. They've been standing and painting picnic tables throughout all the parks. They have been collecting the trash and the recycling, a lot of the new stuff, doing a lot of the weeding throughout the beds. They installed a new post and rail fence along the trail at Gallagher Road, and they also repaired a damaged sink that we had at Clemacrone Park. Somebody smashed part of a sink in one of the bathrooms at Clemacrone Park, unfortunately. And then we just had some problems with the water fountains down there that I know they had fixed. Those weren't damaged by someone, but they just were not functioning. So they've been keeping pretty busy.
They were installing new fountains on the pond at the Willows.
Okay.
Speaking of damage, what was the end result at Agnes Irwin after all that damage was done by the somebody associated with during the rec basketball times. Did we lose Agnes Irwin as a gym going forward, or was there ever
well-
a meeting about all that?
Sure. Well, so first of all, just, Radnor Youth Basketball is its own organization now. We did work with that program to become its own independent organization, but I understand that there was some damage that was caused down there that was several $1,000s that the program was on the hook for. Some classrooms were trashed, and iPads, I guess, were stolen. Sounds like maybe folks who were coming to support players or be there, friends of family players that were there. They were never able to really find out exactly who it was. I think they narrowed it down to a couple of time frame windows when certain groups were playing, sent out some emails to try and see if anybody saw anything, but there weren't any cameras and no one came forward to report anything. But to answer your question, I don't believe they've been given a formal answer yet from Agnes Irwin.
Okay.
I know that they have overall concerns in general for gym time coming up next year in lieu of Agnes Irwin, in lieu of Radnor Activity Center. We don't know what the status will be there. Hopefully it's a positive one. And then I know they have continually lost time at the school district, with the school district schools, which has been something that's been difficult as well, and they've been navigating.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Tammy?
I just have a question. Do you get a lot of reports of damages from, I guess, the parks in general from the township?
When they happen, we get them. They usually come to our department.
Is it
It's not I wouldn't say it's a lot, no, but it happens. It happens on occasion. Clemacrone was unfortunate, but, prior to that, I know up at Emlentonell, we had some damages continually to the batting cage structures that are up there. So that was another, within the last, we'll say, 4 months, I guess, that occurred. So things do happen. I know we've had issues at Cowan, we've had issues at Clemacrone before it was redone. We had issues at Enki, not with the tree. The tree was another issue, but we had someone go in one of the bathrooms and up through the drop ceiling and down and into the concession stand, pilfer things that were in there. So that was an issue that led to us getting video camera, surveillance camera over there. All needs to be fixed now, obviously, which is in process. But we do have a fair share of damages. I mean, parks probably see things sometimes that I don't get reported to me, like graffiti and overturned things, stuff like that they just handle. It's interesting because I know that the video cameras in the places where we've had them have really helped. We've seen that help at Radnor Activity Center. We saw it help at Enki once we got them. So I know that's something that we've been talking internally about. I think we've kind of piecemealed some of the locations where we've had them, but trying to standardize now, like trying to get them in all the parks. Like when Emlentonell is constructed, that's going to be a goal, is to make sure that there's one on that building, because we know that is a site where we've had some recurring issues.
Thank you. Claire, anything on Shade Tree?
Yes, thanks. First of all, Shade Tree Committee is purchasing with the Shade Tree Fund 70 trees. And there was a flyer, and I don't know if you saw that, Tammy, that went out to residents, and anybody can, for street trees, anybody can reserve one and say, yes, I'd like a street tree in front of my yard, but it has to be in the right of way. And if we don't, it's still out there, and we're taking, I guess, orders, and it has to be figured out where the wires are, kind of not always a great location, but if we don't place them all with residents, we are going to use those trees or marked to be put in the parks. And John Hosback is going to be working with Tammy and Steve Orsini to figure out where the best places are to put them in the parks. Is this news to you?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's, as you were talking, it was all coming back to me.
So a couple things is we want to kind of keep figure out which parks those are. So this board should know.
Mm-hmm.
And
John is who we usually rely on to guide us.
Yep.
So we can find out what those end up being and
Okay.
report that back to this board.
Right, great. So between the two of us, you
Mhm.
know, if I'm not here, we can figure out
Absolutely.
and let you guys know that. And then also is this rumor true that a water truck has been purchased, or a truck that can accommodate a water, or is that not true?
Well, it's not a water truck, so I guess the question had been is whether or not Public Works could mobily navigate the parks with water.
Yes.
To be able to water trees when we plant new trees.
Yes.
And I guess previously we had a tank in the back of one of our trucks, but it was contaminated, so we never really used it
Okay.
for watering. So we recently did purchase a new one, which would be used like at Hartford, for instance, for them to be able to navigate the park and drive through the park. I know we talked internally about ordering some walking, like hand units, I guess, to where they could walk with something that's like a cart of sorts, so they could be able to navigate, again, the parks to be able to water the trees.
Great.
Which is important to save them.
Yes,
once
because
they're
one
planted.
of the goals for Shade Tree Commission is if we're gonna spend the money to put these trees
Yes.
in, is that we wanna make sure that we take care of them. As we've seen over the last several years, when we've lost trees in parks, it's because they haven't been cared for.
Yeah, the only
properly.
thing I would just say to suggest is just make sure Steve McNeilis is
Yeah.
involved in those conversations too, which I can let him know, you know, internally, but as those happen, just so he's aware.
Part of the goals, I think, as we talk at Shade Tree and here is that sometimes communication gets missed between the different boards. So the more we say it, the more we can connect the dots there. So that would be great. And I will add Steve and Eileen Brett, who is the chair of Shade Tree, is a tremendous force, and she's really got our committee moving towards good goals. So that's it from Shade Tree.
What kind of trees are they?
They're different species. There's about 8 to 10 different species that are deciduous mostly, and that they really grow well in this soil with things that are, you know, no ash and no pear,
Right.
as things. And I'm not exactly as tree savvy as I am.
Okay.
Clear any
My
idea
street
how
trees
projected
grow.
height of these trees, are they standard, or is it?
Yeah, so it depends on, they're meant to be street trees, so they're like shade trees.
Right.
So that they're to grow and that you can go underneath them and park cars and things,
Right.
but to kind of replace the canopy in our township, which we are depleted by a lot. So it affects parks a lot, because we want to make sure when we plant them in our parks, and they get to the right places and do a good job.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, anything from the Board of Commissioners?
Well, Monday night, we have Part B of the discussion of the capital programs. And then on the 20th, we plan to vote on some of those. We've come up with a way to fund capital programs. The board agreed, and Bill White is working on a new bond issue, because another bond issue finishes up the end of this year. So literally, we can borrow $7-8 million and not change our debt load at all. So no tax increase necessary or whatever. That's the biggest thing going on. 3 commissioners met with WPP board, and John Rice, excellent meeting, and some changes to the lease will come back in front of us probably at the next scheduled meeting, and basically gave them direction to get working. So they're going to be starting with things like the roof, you know, make the building watertight, weathertight. Also, I had 3 different folks contact me about Skunk Hollow. One sent pictures, so I forwarded them to Bob, and the staff's taking care of the issues. But these were things, you know, Skunk Hollow's got that dubious position of being a working location for the public works as well as a park. And every now and then it gets out of hand, and we just have to remind them, and they clean it up. Most of the problem was the yard waste had been piled up. They haven't been able to grind it up all the yard waste goes into the tub grinder with branches and whatever.
Right.
And they were supposed to start back on that this week. So,
Okay. Thank you. Before we jump into old business, I'd like to give anybody in the public who has anything they'd like to contribute this evening an opportunity to speak. Radnor High School guys that are here tonight, thanks for joining us. Anything you guys want to talk about regarding the parks from your perspective?
Yeah, I have a question about the skunk hollow.
Yeah.
What are the issues like being fixed?
the main issue was bags and piles of what appeared to be trash to someone who didn't know what it was. And also some equipment, pieces of equipment placed around, and also some heavy rutting from the vehicles that was, and so there was standing water, and people were concerned about mosquitoes.
Any other questions, guys? Thanks for coming out tonight. All right, let's jump into old business. Tammy Emlyn Tunnel Comfort Station project. Last I recall, the project had gotten the go-ahead from the Board of Commissioners and it's out for bid. Is that where
No,
we
so
stand?
we got
No?
the go-ahead. So right now, we're in the process of working with the vendor that we're gonna purchase the comfort station from, to review a full scope of work and full building plan. So basically, it's 167 pages of specs on toilets and sinks and floors and door jams and all kinds of things like that. Steve Norsini and I are in the process of going through, making sure we have it all spec'd out the way we want.
Okay.
In terms of equipment and machinery, picking colors, that's the exciting part. As of right now, it will look similar to Enki's bathroom, for consistency, of course, and the Radnor burgundy colors. So working through that process, basically, with their project manager that they have through their company, and then what that will produce is a full set of building plans. That's a sealed, basically, submittal to the township of the plan. That'll be reviewed by our codes, building department, engineering, and then there's sometimes a back and forth to get that to where it's, satisfactory per the codes of Radnor Township. And then at that point, that'll be sort of there, once we sign off on that, that'll be ROMTech's green light to go and build it, make it happen. And then at some point, it'll get shipped to us. So at that point, once we have the final engineered plans, we're gonna work with our township engineers. In this particular project, it's Gannett Fleming. So even though Steve's involved in the process, we do use our consultants. And they'll basically design the site, put together the full site development plan and detail, and the whole package of what will go out to bid for a contractor for construction. So we've received authorization already to go to bid on this project. We actually received it in January of 17, so we don't have to go back to the board at this
Okay.
point until we go to bid, and then we basically accept the bids and then award. So we still have a lot of time to put into the project, but it's moving.
From a timeline standpoint, what's your best guess for?
I always get this wrong.
That's why I say best guess.
I'm gonna say the goal is spring.
Goal is to
I think
have
that's
it
safe. The goal is to have that building
Up and
constructed,
running
up and running by spring.
next spring,
I think that
softball
would be
season.
a good goal to have for
That'd
the
be a great goal
softball
to
season.
have.
Yeah.
Okay.
What year was it? Okay.
Let's see, when did we first start talking about it?
So guys, I'm just gonna, just
Yeah.
for the benefit of the Radnor High School kids
20
here.
years ago?
So,
Yes.
when you decide, all know Emlyn Tunnel Field, right? When we all decide we're gonna put a comfort station somewhere to Enki out here, and a snack bar, et cetera, over there, we can't just say, let's do it, and then go buy the building and put it in. It's about 2 years in the making now, and what has to happen is, one, you have to find the funding for it. Secondly, you have to make sure you involve the neighbors so they understand what's going on, what changes are gonna happen within their park, and get their feedback, et cetera. And then once you have all of that, then you have to decide where you're gonna put it, and you have to design it so it meets the codes within the township. You have to write specs and send those out to the company so that they can bid on how much it's gonna cost to build the structure. It it gets shipped here, and you have to have a contractor come and grade and install it, you need pipes and sewer and all that kind of good stuff, so.
Include the
it's-
school district?
The school district,
Oh,
who owns the school district owns the property over there and leases it to the township, so we had to get their approval to do all this, so just so to give you an understanding of how things work within governments, you know, a project that seems like it's a pretty simple
Very simple.
project is a 2 to 3 year project to get something like that done.
The
So
word
just-
glacial comes to mind.
Yeah.
Yes, glacial's a good word.
Obama say it's like driving a cruise liner, not a speedboat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slow turns.
Can I just ask you a question on that?
Please.
Will, when you were talking about being done, are they also doing the other parts, like how the trail was going to be moved, or the walkways and all that? That's all being done at the same time?
All the site work that will be relative to the comfort station installation, as well as any things that have to be moved or rearranged, like the path, like the flagpole.
Right.
Obviously, the batting cages at some point are gonna have to come out and then later on reinstalled and reconfigured by the Little League Association, but those things we would have to do.
Okay,
And
good.
part of that step too is coming back to school board as well.
True,
So
true.
we kind of left that one out, but there's another step in there and
The
coming
whole
back to you
thing,
guys.
we're working
too.
on the whole thing at this.
Has that upper corner spot been decided on?
It has,
So it's
Yeah,
the
I
upper
think
corner of
everybody-
the
yes.
parking lot?
Right.
right
on
off
the
the
field.
parking lot.
Yep, okay.
Maybe over and down a little bit, just depending on the grading, but that's where, once the building is configured and finalized, that's where the engineers work their magic in terms of situating it. And then we'll work with them to make sure we like what we see. And that it makes sense, and there's
Is Radnor-
appropriate buffering and all that around
Yeah.
there.
Is Radnor Wayne Little League still as involved as they were last year? I mean, are they staying, keeping their eye on it?
I think at this point, they're kind of, letting us take the lead.
Right.
And then, as far as once we re-engage in terms of the site, that's where
Then
I would
we'll go
expect
back.
they would be, become part of the conversations again, relative to the batting cages and all of that especially.
Well, as leadership changes, as Bill knows with these organizations, sometimes bringing them up to speed.
Yep, definitely. Well, I know they always try
The
to come
difference
in and
between
meet.
this, sorry, Tammy.
That's okay.
The difference between this and Enki is it's not being funded at all by the
Right.
Whereas at Enki, it was a collaborative effort with funding sources and whatnot.
You could do that.
Yeah.
I'm not involved in the
Was there any decisions or discussions more about the mulch?
There have not been. I know we've had internal discussions on it. I think in the interest of trying to accommodate some of the residents who don't want to lose the mulch in that area, we've done a couple of things. So like right now, they've tried to reduce the size of the piles so that there's not as much that's there on an ongoing basis. But then when it gets low, the residents contact Public Works, let them know it's low, they come back, they replenish it. Obviously, it's still in the parking lot area, and I'd like to see that go away once the building's installed, because those spots, even though now they're not handicapped, they're gonna be handicapped spots because they're gonna have to be accessible to the building. So some of that's gonna need to be changed. So the thought was to create sort of the defined paved bin areas like we did at Warren Philippone, or we're discussing in terms of the plans for there, was to maybe create something in one of the landscape beds over at Canal to try and accommodate it. But I still hear from a lot of people, get rid of it, we don't need it, they can go somewhere else and get it. But then I hear residents that say, no, we need to be able to have it. So I think it's an ongoing.
15 phone calls this year
On
mulch, and where is it, and what's going on with it. I hear you're gonna do away with it.
Oh, well, that's good
It's a good
information to
program.
know, and that's why.
It's a good program, but in a parking lot that doesn't accommodate many cars and needs to accommodate more cars, it's probably not a great place for it.
Plus, it gets dragged all over the lot. If we're going to take steps to beautify the park, having piles of you-know-what all over the parking lot isn't aesthetically pleasing either.
So that'll definitely warrant some future discussion, because I know we'll be having it relative to O'Connor once that's being finalized, as well as Fenimore.
Thank you. And I feel like I'm asking you to talk a lot this evening, so
I
I
don't mind.
apologize, but
Hey,
it's
I don't-
pretty much
I don't
updates
mind at
on
all.
projects we have
It's
in
okay, no,
process,
it's
so.
good. It's good to have
You
the
mind
dialogue.
jumping over to Bo Connor and Warren Philippone and give us an update?
So the project of the park improvements at O'Connor, Warren Philippone, another bond project, again, just in addition to Edmonton L, these were all bonded projects that we had distinct borrowing back in 2015, the end of 2015, we passed ordinance on that. So O'Connor, Warren Philippone is officially out to bid. This board reviewed the plans. We looked at them with the residents in July of 18. And it's probably gonna be, I think we had our pre-bid meeting on May 1st. We'll get bids back on May 22nd. So provided everything goes well and things that are received are accurate, because they have to come back a certain way, the folks who are putting in their bids for the project, you know, obviously they've got to be couched and, you know, developed a certain way that's acceptable to the township. So once we get those, review those, we'll have official bid opening, and then provided everyone is in compliance, we'll pick the low bidder, and we'll be going back to the Board of Commissioners hopefully in June to award the contract.
Do we
And then
add or lose any spots with this
No.
conversion?
We didn't lose.
Stays the same pretty much?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really just it's a redo of parking lot, tennis courts, fencing.
Pickleball.
Well, that's in as an alternate.
So, just to clarify, and Claire and I were talking about this the other day, the bid is out for what was originally approved for the bonds, underneath the bond for the changes and improvements we made there. Pickleball is one of a couple alternates that's on there to surface that pad at the upper level there and install what can be used as a pickleball court. If we're over budgets, then alternates probably won't be considered, or is it then up to the commissioners to determine, hey, the project was, you know, allocated, I forget the dollar amount,
A little under $1 million
little
for
under $1
both
million,
parks.
and we're $75,000 over with a couple of these alternates in there, then the board could consider approving those alternates, even though it's over what the bond budget was.
Yeah, we had to do that with McCrum.
Right,
Yeah, they definitely could review that. You know, obviously we'll cross that bridge when we get those numbers back. Ideally, you know, it's all under, and we can get all of those alternates done, which
Yeah.
include the basketball court too.
Mhm.
But at that point, we would have to approach the board with a plan to fund it, whether that's from within dollars that are with other projects within the bond that maybe haven't used all of their dollars, if that's possible at this point. I know we've been looking at a lot of that internally. And or other sources of funding.
Is the hope this time, by this time next year, to have that all completed, or is that too optimistic of a timeline?
Well, I mean, if we award in June or July, the thought would be a contractor probably can mobilize by October, November. I mean, I sit here and I say this, and then I'm always a liar because I come back to you 5 months later and say, well, it's still in process.
They're only projections.
But
Right.
if it moves quickly, then that could realistically be the time.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I ask, I know, is that I'm sure members of this board have the same issue, and I know Commissioner Nagel does as well, is folks in the community ask, well, I hear this is going on, when can we expect it? So, in an effort that, not to overpromise,
Right.
I will tell people by Labor Day they'll be able to play pickleball in a new
Yeah.
court. That would be foolish to say that. So that's
Mhm.
that's the only reason I
Right,
asked, not to try to
absolutely.
pin anybody down to a timeline, just to make sure we're not
Yeah.
overselling it in the community as with
Sometimes
speed.
I feel like I oversell it.
No. I have a question. What is the status of the concept of the infield fields?
Well, I know that Little League and the potential donor or potential portion of a donor. So there was a resident that brought this project forward initially and then was trying to collaborate with Little League to get it done. I'm not sure who was funding what portion, but I know that was a big piece of it. So I know Little League was trying to understand that as well as start to prepare a design.
So that's
So that
still-
then they could come back to this board and show you the design, and then, you know, we would evaluate that.
But it's not included, I mean, I know that we had talked at one point that the bond would, if we were gonna be redoing the tennis courts, and we would think
Mhm.
about this, so this is a separate idea.
It's a separate project. It has to come from separate funding. It was
Yeah.
not funded within the bond.
We
It's
had
gonna-
looked at one drawing that maybe tied the fences together of that tennis court and of the field, et cetera. But because the bond had been approved going back 2 or 3 years now, and the money's really need to be spent, and the costs to do the projects are only going to go up, and Little League wasn't far enough along with their planning and so letting us know who was going to maintain that field and all those kinds of things. So,
Well, I'm in favor of the, following through with the bond.
Yeah.
And I.
Right.
And that's critical, and that's why a lot of these, I'll call them ancillary, I don't think of them that way, but like the pickleball, like the basketball court, that's why some of those, we tried to craft those in a way as alternates so that we have this money if it can afford all of those as well. Because we know, especially the basketball courts, that's a capital project that sits with us at some point that we have to fund. But try to get some of these extras done with it that just seem to make sense. And restoring those pads is something that we need to do as well. Doesn't mean we have to turn them into official pickleball courts, but at some point they should probably be resurfaced. And I think we take a look at that after we get the bids back. Does it accommodate it, does it not? And then maybe make some decisions as we go forward on how we get those projects done if they're not funded.
Great, thank you.
And Radnor High School guys, just for your benefit, one of the challenges we have in this township is we have 20-some parks in this township. So as you guys have all been to a lot of the parks here, it's a great benefit to have all these parks. The problem is it costs a lot of money to maintain and improve those parks. We did up at Clem-McCrone, the improvements we made up there, and we're trying to do one over at Fenimore Woods now. It takes a lot of money to do that. You don't have enough money necessarily in your budget without raising taxes and things like that. So the commissioners have to balance out what to spend on everyday costs versus what to spend on what we call capital costs, which are costs you use to improve or to build something that's going to be there for a long time. So that's one of the challenges we have in our township, is having enough money for all the parks that we have out there to keep them up to speed and to improve them when they need to be improved. All right, Tammy, let's go to C, Fenimore Woods.
All right, Fenimore Woods. So Fenimore Woods, we reviewed in February, we reviewed in March, and the goal is that the same presentation will go before the Board of Commissioners, hopefully on the May 20th agenda. That's what I anticipate, so on the week. And then subsequent to that, but as part of that meeting, the hope would be to get a motion of authorization to go to bid, so that we can work with the consultant that I know made the presentation with this board, so that we could start to get that ready for bid.
And if I recall, the pond, the changes to the pond were pulled out.
Yes, the
of
pond
project
portion was pulled
at
out
this point in time.
relative to stormwater. So that could be part of
That'd be a
greater
separate-
stormwater
be a separate-
impact
okay.
pieces, yep. So, the one thing just to point out though is as we move forward, because obviously if in a perfect world on Monday night, the presentation would go smoothly and the board would vote to authorize us to go to bid, we'd start working to put the specs together. If there are major changes, or I know some of the things that we talked about, like the fireplace and like some of the pieces throughout that, as decisions are made on that and we look at that more closely, I would of course come back to this board and update you guys so you know how that's moving forward. It'd be a matter of, kind of just checking in, and then if we thought that there was items that we needed to get some resolution on, we could even have more hearty discussion and make some decisions.
Any questions on Fenimore Woods?
Was there any further debate on walkways from, was it Walnut Lane coming down? Some of the residents were concerned about walkways around the park. Is that off the table, or is that still under consideration?
Well, so any type of sidewalks that would be installed on Walnut, either side of Walnut, wouldn't be relative to this project because they wouldn't fall within the park's property lines. I mean, those residents that I know were interested in the sidewalk project. It just wouldn't be something that would be funded as part of this, but certainly something that if that was something that would come to fruition, the park, at least at this point, could still be set up perhaps to receive those in an appropriate way, or be designed as such to accommodate those. But that, I don't really know of that being a living and breathing project at this point for sidewalks on Walnut.
And they haven't talked to their commission.
Right. And the bond that John was talking about, the $7 million bond that they're thinking about floating, they're going to have another meeting on a Monday night. if you go online, maybe Tammy can send out a link to,
Thanks, guys.
thanks guys. Maybe Tammy can send that link out. I think you only sent that to Bill and me, but there's a link that shows right now, a draft of what that $7 million will be used for.
Okay.
Majority of it is public works, types of projects, sidewalks, things like that. So not a lot of parks, I recall from scanning quickly,
Trails.
some trail stuff as
Trails.
well. Tam, if you can send a link out so everybody here can take a look at that, you'll get a feel for what they're talking about spending $7 million
Good.
on.
Okay, thanks.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else on Fenimore Woods? Okay, our Enki Park concession stand repairs from the tree.
So we had a tree, as you know, it came down. Fortunately, didn't hurt anyone when it came down. As of right now, I believe we have the electrician mobilized to demo some of the electrical parts. The original designer of the building was engaged originally very quickly after the incident had happened, and he put together the specs on the demolition and the restoration. So we've been working really closely with our engineering department. And of course, this is an insurance. Gary Haverty.
Is Accione part of that building back up, or is that's completely
Who's
out?
that?
Accione was the actual builder?
No, so there's a contractor to do the construction, and then I think it's East Coast
Okay.
Construction, and then there's a particular electrician that's another sort of part
That's
to
great
it.
that Gary's doing it.
And so it's moving.
Yeah, great.
You know, I know that the repair costs, I believe, were received by the insurance company, so everything was all vetted out there, and they've already started to work. It's moving slow. I think we all want it to move fast because baseball's up and running right now as we speak. So I don't have a timeline on the project.
Is there any concern about insurance covering everything there, or we think it'll be fully paid
It was
for?
all covered.
Great.
At least, so one of the things Gary put together was he put the spec together, and then the contractors bid on those specs. So they, provided us with hard costs, and then Gary had a cost, of course, that was relative to the whole project as well, and that all went through the insurance company. So I'm not aware of any concerns. I don't believe we would have started work without knowing for sure that it would have been.
The numbers weren't outrageous?
Yeah. No, it was well under 50,000.
Oh, okay.
I think it was like 40.
All right.
43.
We also sent Osback out to look at the trees, if there were additional trees, and there were.
Yep.
And they've been taken care
Yeah,
of.
like 10 more.
Great.
So it's in the process of being restored. Hopefully before Night at the Ballpark.
Yeah.
That's my goal anyways. It's July 24th.
July 24th.
July 24th.
Okay, and last but not least on our old business list, the Radnor Activity Center.
So the rack, so the rack was another insurance situation with floor damage that occurred in August, as you all know, and repairs that were performed throughout the fall that ended up becoming unsatisfactory. So in February, I think when we maybe last talked about it, there was an engineering report that was done. We got together with the school district, the insurance company, the floor company, and decided that report really didn't tell us a whole lot. Didn't really give us a whole lot of information to make decisions on how to repair the facility so that it's satisfactory to both parties, or I should say 3 parties, school district, township, and flooring company. So the decision that was made when we all met was to do readings in the floor. So 15 locations were allocated throughout the floor where there were moisture readings that were taken and have been taken twice a week for about the past 6 weeks, about 4 weeks. I think we're trying to get to 6 weeks at this point in terms of that information. Relative humidity in the building is being evaluated relative to each of those reading days, as well as the weather and the temperature and the conditions outside, to sort of understand, when does it have higher, content of moisture versus lower? Is it impacted when it's a rainy day, when it's not a rainy day? All of those pieces. There were also holes cut in the floor to look at the conditions of the concrete. and they're also measuring also over across, I think like a week of time or 2 weeks of time to see, again, you know, given what's going on in the facility, outside, you know, are the conditions changing? So there were sensors that were installed. So in the coming weeks, we're gonna gather all this data, see what it tells us, and, you know, the goal is that we'll reconvene with the school district personnel, who we've been working closely with, the director of operations, of course, and the director of business, the flooring company, and of course the engineers that have been involved, and we'll get back together and figure out, like, you know, what is a way to fix it so that it's acceptable to everyone. And I think the goal is that we can actually arrive at some sort of a consensus and then get the project done. I mean, I can say at a minimum, the floor, obviously the holes that have been cut are going to need to be replaced. There's significant resurfacing that needs to be done and repainting. I mean, the floor is in terrible shape in terms of its paintwork right now. It looks nothing like, you know, the new floor that was to be delivered in October, so, or December, whenever it was. But so there's a lot. I think there's been a lot of.
When will they conclude the readings, the various readings that they're doing?
Within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Next 2 to 3 weeks, and then they'll put a report together and present that. Who's paying for this? Engineering firm is doing all this
So the
work?
flooring company is doing. They're doing the humidity readings and the moisture readings in the floor, and then there's an outside firm that was engaged to do the concrete and subfloor evaluations. I'm not sure who's paying for that at this point. I assume it will be the township, and then it would be filed as part of the claim, since we're on the hook for anything and everything on that facility.
The flooring company will come in and replace all that they've done? Is that part of the agreement?
If they accept that, that's, if, I mean, it depends on how the work is spec'd out. You know, if the township holds its position that the subfloor needs to be replaced, it may end up in a legal dispute if they're not willing to accept that.
Should they have known that end? Yeah, okay. All right.
Because when the floor was replaced, the subfloor was not replaced, just the top maple
It
was
was
replaced.
supposed to be replaced.
It was supposed to be
And the
replaced.
flooring company came back and
Yep.
said, it doesn't need to be replaced.
Yes.
We won't replace it, and we'll cut the cost down to reflect that, and that's what happened.
Mhm.
And so now we're waiting to see.
Wait, an insurance company said that?
No, the
I don't
flooring
know.
company,
Flooring
the flooring company, when they originally put the scope of work together, it included it.
I was trying to get some.
Yeah.
The insurance company didn't want to pay.
It was
Well,
only $9,000. I mean, it was
Well, most of the.
it was small compared to the job.
The workmanship issues won't be covered by insurance anyway. It's only resultant damage that will be covered by the floor folks' insurance anyway, so it's gonna come out of their pocket.
And there's no indication of what the concrete shape is in?
I don't
because-
know right now. I don't have any feedback.
But I mean, if they never took off the.
No,
They wouldn't know, right? So,
not unless the subfloor was pulled off the concrete. I think that's kind of one of the biggest unknowns to the whole project. So unfortunately, the
Right.
building remains closed and programming is either relocated or not happening.
Okay. Any questions about RAC? Okay, thank you, Tammy, for all those updates. That's it for old business, and unless somebody else has something else they'd like to bring up?
2 things. One, and it is parks related, is the bridge at Radnor Elementary that goes over, since it connects 2 of our parks. The school district and the township are doing a joint, pretty big project there that it was in pretty bad shape. So that starts this week.
Good question.
Yeah.
I don't
So
think the
did-
real work really starts till 2020, but a lot of the.
No.
Wasn't that built with the new school?
Yeah.
And how old is that now? I'm dating myself.
2002?
Is it 20 years?
Almost.
It's been since I've been here, so it's after 99.
it's actually 2000.
I keep
2000.
missing get tenure gaps. I feel like
It was one of those Y2K issues.
Yeah, we waited.
I was in the first class.
And the other thing,
Charlie, what was his name?
you mentioned earlier about Susan, it's a loss for the community. Another Parks Board member has had a similar tragedy. Joe Ritz, his
Yeah.
wife passed. Joe was on the Parks Board for 2 terms.
And she was on the planning commission.
No, she was on the
Design review board.
Yeah.
Here's one of the things I learned from Susan. This may seem silly, but it impacted me. I have 2 dogs, and I just assume everybody loves dogs. Susan didn't really care for dogs, and she made a point in this, in one of our sessions, saying, I'm trying to go for a walk, and people don't have their dogs on leashes, or don't control dogs. Dogs come jump on me, etc. I'm not a dog person. I don't like that. And so when we were talking about dogs in parks and some of the different things we talked about here, and so I've always been more cognizant of my dogs and people. When I bump into people or they come to my house with dogs, I learned that from Susan.
Yeah.
So it's a simple thing, but it was a good lesson for me.
Learned a lot of things from Susan.
Yes, we did.
I also had an interesting phone call this week. Someone was complaining that we've culled too many deer because she doesn't see any deer in her neighborhood. And I suggested that she come over to my house.
That's right.
But the fact is, I've checked in with the police. We'll find out when we do the census this year. But we're getting very close to our target, which is in the 12 to 14 deer per square mile range. And we're right about there. Then the hope is the bow hunters will be able to control up the population after that.
Do you guys look into fox and do anybody look into the fox population?
The only other animal control issues we're looking at are geese.
There's no new business on this agenda. Is there a new business anybody here wants to bring up today? Okay.
Just a quick question. I see a lot of parks that are listed down here in the updates, and I watched a little bit of the meeting on Monday.
The Capitol.
Yeah, the Capitol. Just so that I'm clear, when they do have the budget for that particular item, okay, and it hasn't been used, and it's been there for a couple of years, does it stay in place?
No. If it's budgeted this year and the work doesn't get done, it has to be reauthorized. The problem also you get is the 5-year capital plan has quite a few items in it that they're approved projects, but they're not approved funding. So that's why we're struggling so much with this.
Okay.
And hopefully this Monday and then the 20th we'll be able to address the situation.
Okay.
School board, how did the facilities meeting go Monday? Talking about the athletic facilities, was there any progress on that?
I believe.
I wanted to go, my life is not my own these days.
It was quite a meeting. So what we were basically asked to do is to give a green light to proceed with more conceptual work. And then, just people presenting the case, lots of members of the community came. So there was lots of discussion, lots of information. That it was pretty positive. When you're considering, when I say multi-million-dollar project, I'm not saying like a couple million. We're talking between $15 and $20 million. So it's going to be a bond type situation.
What's entailed in that, Adrian? I'm not familiar with the project. What's entailed in?
Sure. So Prevo Field and Enke Field at the high school, there are lots of ADA and accessibility issues. I've seen some nods here, and so you have that. But also, it's just the idea that you have facilities that just need updating. Things just need to be updated once every 30, 40, 50 years. That's how infrastructure works. So a lot of that is sort of wrapped up into the proposal as well.
It's not just the fields, it's
Okay.
everything around the fields, and ADA parking and accessibility and bathrooms on.
Air conditioning in the gym.
Well, that was discussed.
Oh, good.
That's actually gonna.
And I think we're gonna move that forward quicker than, we're not gonna tie that up with this piece, that's actually moving ahead pretty well. But we also discussed a wellness center that would be put in, team rooms on the bottom, so that the team could walk right in, both the opposing and the home team could walk right in with bathrooms in them, so that the team doesn't have to run up and down the staircase. and the ADA ramps would allow the band to come down so that it would be hazardous bringing the materials down.
Sure.
And
anybody else who needs
and
to.
anybody else need to come down, exactly. And then also some kind of a connection to the existing weight room or fitness room. They don't have to go up and down the stairs, they can go right into it. So there was a lot of different things proposed. It received a really nice reception, I believe, from the school board. The school board really says, look, it's ADA, we actually are behind where we should be with it, so let's make sure that we do this. They're going to come back with more numbers and kind of trying to tighten it up and go from concepts. We
Yeah.
did, I think we okayed the engineering to get some engineering pieces done also, so.
And one piece of detail is that actually they had Schrader Group had a kind of a master plan that comprised 4 sub-plans, yeah?
Right.
And so-
7 sub-plans, right? Or was it?
And
There
then
were
it's
7,
4.
but we just looked at 4.
Yeah.
We can't do more.
Yeah.
So the idea then is you could disaggregate that, and then, we could approve 1 or 2 of them. It could wind up that we say we want to hew very closely to what we actually need, i.e., the ADA compliance, accessibility. That means that some of the parts of that sort of big multi-point plan might not be approved. It's just part of the conversation, but all of that to say that it's progressing now, and I think it's pretty exciting.
And actually, what we are looking for is support from the different people that use it, the sports people, parents that come to see the games, grandparents. Some grandparents can't make it down to the field, or if they're at Enke Field, it can be hazardous, so they don't watch. Some people that come in wheelchairs have to go up and view the game through fences and things like that. So we were saddened by a lot of the information that we received. So we're moving on that.
I had been approached several years back by the Soccer Booster Club to look into just Enke.
Right.
And I had talked to Bechtold several years back about coming up with private-public funding to do it piecemeal
Right.
to avoid the long-term backlog. And
Right. Well, we're looking at
Sort
some
of-
things that we need to approve right away, and other things that we want to put together. We discussed the possibility of putting a building close up to the stands for the entry, which will have actually a porch on it, or a deck that people could come in.
Enke or Prevost?
Both.
It's actually on both.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that you
The-
could have ADA.
Yeah, and the plans will be posted, so people can go on our site and see them. And they're talking about putting an elevator that could work, that will be accessed from the outside, so you could use an elevator to go down, besides the ramps. So we're really looking at doing a first-class job for it. So, thanks for asking.
Thank you for the update.
Just one last question for you.
Well, here.
What does it take to get the conversation started for Autoricea Park?
Well, I think we've talked about this before. It's going to take, I think, the neighbors
Okay.
pushing on that.
Okay.
Coming together, at least that's what we've seen at Clemacrone, was the neighbors worked together, formed a committee, and petitioned the township, the board of commissioners, et cetera, got their commissioner behind it, got other people behind it. So it was a grassroots type of thing. So I think that's a good way to start the conversation with regard to Autoricea. The projects you see here were funded from that bond in 2015 bonds. So,
And you gotta work
Which
with your
Autoricea was
commissioner.
supposed to be part of.
pardon me?
I said, which Autoricea was supposed to be part of.
Yeah, I don't know, I wasn't involved in that, but, so you get your commissioner involved, try and get, neighbors and put a committee together, and from a grassroots standpoint, I think that's how you get some action moving on it.
And that's why.
Just a reminder to folks, if you could please get out to your parks and check them and let us know if you see anything that doesn't look right or needs to be corrected or repaired, et cetera. And also, a second reminder with regard to the events that Tammy and her staff work so hard to put on. please try and get out to those events as much as you can, and, you know, let her know you're there, and support them and talk them up in your community. They're great events. You know, I was hoping, my favorite event of the year is Wheels of Wayne, and I'm running the Radnor Baseball Booster Golf Outing, which is supposed to be the same day as Wheels of Wayne. You cancel Wheels of Wayne. I said, great, maybe we can get our golf outing in. Golf outing, didn't get it on
Chance on Sunday.
and it's the same day as Wheels. So I'm still gonna miss Wheels of Wayne, but anyways, so just a reminder to support those things as well.
Yeah, and if anybody's interested in judging cars or judging food, we do pizza and a pulled pork
Food,
contest.
I-
And I have a job for you. It's a whole lot of fun. Oh, everybody wants to judge food.
It is fun.
Great. Any other questions, comments this evening? I
Any more,
promise-
any more discussion on Odorisia, the bike? Or
No, not tonight.
not tonight? Okay.
All right, well, I promised these guys would be out here in an hour. It's been an hour and 10 minutes, guys, so thanks for coming.
Thanks for hanging in.
Thank you for attending, and we're adjourned.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I need your help.